Welcome to Freedom Lovin'. This is Kevin, and this is episode number 10. Today, I have upcoming in just a minute an interview with Jake Desyllas of thevoluntarylife.com, and we talk about many topics, and including living in other countries, entrepreneurship, and minimalism. So stay tuned for that, and just a few things that I wanted to update everyone on. Or I should say update you on, because when I'm doing a podcast, it's like speaking to, ideally you want to speak to one person instead of speaking to everyone or the group. So because it's only, you're probably listening to it in your earbuds, in your ears right now, and you're not sitting there with a group of people listening to this podcast, most likely. So anyway, this episode has been a long time coming. It was a few days late. I try to get these out once a week. At minimum once a week, and this one I could give you all the reasons, but there was a lot of delays, and it's out now. So anyway, the week before the Independence Day weekend, I was in Portland for the World Domination Summit, and I know that sounds like a really bizarre name for a conference, but it was a conference that brought out a lot of people either already doing or looking to travel and earn income while they travel. So basically support themselves while they travel the world, or just travel in specific areas and do things that most people aren't doing with their lives. So really an interesting place. I didn't actually go to the conference itself. I didn't go to the sessions, but went to a lot of the meetups that were surrounding it, and met a lot of really interesting people. And one thing I learned is that there's a lot of people out there that are looking to do this, that want to earn this passive income that they can travel with, that they can move and not worry about, they're not tied to a specific location. So that was encouraging because of the things that I'm working on at Freedom Lovin' with helping people to get location independent income. Otherwise, Portland was a great town. There's a lot to do there. I saw some beautiful sites. I may even post them on the blog. I've been so not good at posting stuff on the blog, but I'm probably going to get to that. There's a lot of really, really awesome things about Portland, and that was my first time there. So, and including there's a whole section where they have food from just all different parts of the world, and it's like food trucks or food stands all around this park area, and there's 2 of them, so you can just get anything you could think of is pretty much there. And it's all good and it's cheap. So kind of reminded me of Singapore with that kind of thing. Only this was actually even better because there was stuff like Mexican food, which Singapore doesn't really have. So anyway, and as far as the location independent income stuff, I was talking about it last week on the podcast that I would have something up probably this week. I do not, but I do have some stuff that is coming out very, very soon. I'm working with my friend Steve on his affiliate star network, and it's sounding really, really good. It's an awesome thing because it's sort of like the network marketing idea mixed with straight affiliate marketing, and it takes the best of both worlds. So there's no upfront fees, there's no having to buy anything and keep products around or anything like that. It's just straight up affiliate, but you get paid on 10 levels deep. So it's much better than the affiliate programs that I've done in the past. So I'm really excited about that, and I will have something on it very, very soon, and I'll probably have a podcast and a blog on it to let you know about what's going on. And I did also do a blog on this along these lines. I just did a blog post a couple days ago about writing a Kindle book in 5 easy steps, and that's something that I've done. I've got 4 Kindle books on the market, and it's a great way to get started with if you want to earn some passive income. And you've got an idea, or you have some ideas that you think other people might want to hear, you can get a book up in Kindle in really not much time at all, and it's not hard. And that's coming from somebody that I don't like to put a lot of work into things. So I would recommend doing that. Check out the blog post, though. I'll have a link to it in the show notes and on writing a Kindle book, because it can really get you off the ground if you're kind of stuck or wondering what to do to start getting more freedom and getting more of the passive income in your life. So that's that, and I think that's about it for this week. I will have more soon, and stay tuned for the interview with Jake Desyllas with the Voluntary Life, and have a great week, and go out there and build some freedom. Cool. Well, I'm really excited to have Jake Desyllas on the show today. Jake has a blog and podcast at thevoluntarylife.com, and it's on finding freedom in an unfree world, which is a very familiar topic to me and anyone that's listened to this show. Jake, welcome to Freedom Lovin'.
Thanks, Kevin. It's great to be on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I was saying, we're kind of on similar paths in terms of what we're talking about on our podcast and what we're getting out there. And I think that's really cool. Just having discovered your podcast a few months ago, I've been really inspired by a lot of things that you're talking about, and also even able to geek out on some of the liberty and voluntarist and philosophical stuff too.
Yeah, thanks. I was also really pleased to find your podcast, and I can see that we've obviously both been influenced by Harry Brown's book, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World, and I can see, that you're sort of doing a lot of things with your life to live free in a similar kind of way, so that's really cool.
Yeah, that's what it's about. So what inspired you to start your blog and then later your podcast?
Well, it actually all started as a book club, funnily enough. I was in London and I was interested in reading more books about ways of finding freedom in my own life. So not abstract political stuff, but more tangible, concrete things like unjobbing and, different approaches to financial freedom and these kinds of books. And I thought it'd be really cool to do that with other people who had similar interests. So I started this book club, started it through Meetup, and I also did a version on Skype, because I know a lot of people who are interested in these topics who via the internet, so I thought that'd be good too. Eventually, we were recording the Skype calls, and you'll see on my podcast that quite a few of the first podcasts are just discussions about different books, and that's because that's how it all started. And eventually I decided, well, this would be a nice thing to do to make a podcast out of it. And literally, because we were talking about freedom books, it was the Freedom Book Club. But then I actually found out, there actually is a Freedom Book Club who've already got that URL. Oh. And so I started thinking, well, actually, I could make this about something much broader, not just books about this, but actually living as freely as possible. And that's really what the voluntary life as a name and as a concept is. And that led me to sort of think more about things that I could expand on in the podcast. And a lot of people have asked me about entrepreneurship, because I guess that's my sort of particular experience and one of my key interests in terms of getting more freedom. So it really evolved. The podcast wasn't something that I said, I'm going to do this podcast and this is exactly what it's going to be about. It's something that just evolved from an interest in the topic and from getting feedback from people, especially saying that, wanting to ask questions and have topics about entrepreneurship. And that's sort of more and more where the show has gone in terms of the kind of subject areas covered.
Yeah, really cool. Now that's kind of your background, is you were an entrepreneur and.
Yeah, that's right. I started a company. I was in university. I did loads of different things, like no clear career path at all. I was doing lots of different types of research and worked as a property market consultant, and then did some postgraduate research in university. And eventually I got more and more interested in applying some of the kind of computer simulations and things that I was learning about in my postgraduate work at university in a real business, in my own business. So I started a business with one other partner. We basically grew the business until we were able to pay off our initial loans. We funded it all with loans that we were personally liable for. And then we grew the business, got it to a profitable status, and then continued making profit for a couple of years. And then just looked around at the other companies that we were doing a lot of work together with, and thought there's a real opportunity to sell the company, especially because my business was a very specialist type of computer simulation. It was looking at pedestrian flows for engineering and urban development. And that's the kind of thing that there were a lot of bigger companies that would like to add that sort of expertise to. So yeah, we negotiated the sale of the business, and I then worked in the large engineering company that bought my business for a few years as part of the sort of sale agreement. And then that finished a couple of years ago, and since then I've been completely free. So that's the sort of the history.
Nice. So what now are you doing to find freedom in an unfree world? And then how would you define freedom? We actually we've been saying the word freedom a lot and haven't even talked about what exactly it means.
Yeah. That's a really good and important question. And I like Harry Brown's definition, which is freedom is being able to live your life the way that you want to, not the way that somebody else thinks that you should. And that's sort of the way that I view it. So freedom for me is really about being able to make a conscious choice about how you want to live. There's so many ways in which, you grow up in a particular country, you get involved in particular areas of work, whatever, often because that's sort of what you're familiar with, your family's involved with, or you just know about. And you have friends and family that you kind of have over time developed. And I think real freedom is to be conscious about all of those things and to really be aware of what you actually want your life to look like. Do you want to live in the place that you live? Do you want to have the circle of friends that you have and the family connections that you have? Do you want your life to look the way that it does? And if you do, great. And if you don't, then I think there's a really interesting challenge there to actually change your life in a way that you feel is a life that is chosen by you. And that's the key. I mean, that's why I guess the podcast is called The Voluntary Life, because I think the more you choose how to live your life, the freer you are, and really the more alive you are, the more you get to express your individuality and your own self. So that's how I view it. And, in terms of your other question of how do I try and find freedom, I guess it's through that process of really trying to make my own choices about how can I live the life that I want to live. For me, that really started with entrepreneurship, because working for yourself and building up your own company that you make the decisions about how you want this to do business and what kind of work you want to do, what's meaningful to you. That to me was a really fundamental experience in terms of me thinking about, what kind of life do I want to live? I learned a huge amount just through the experience of doing entrepreneurship. And I guess that led me on to thinking not just in terms of how can I really do what I want to in terms of my work, but also in terms of my social life and in terms of where I live. And those are all things that I'm exploring more now and that are reflected in some of the other guests that I've had on the show, talking about wider topics of freedom like schooling and these kinds of issues too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and do you find it difficult, to kind of, at this point, maybe you've kind of broken free, but in the early stages, you mentioned some things like, kind of deciding where you want to live and who you want to hang out with and things like that. Do you think those are difficult things to do?
Yeah, I think, especially your social relationships, your friends and family. If you choose to change the way that you live, if you choose to change what you do for a living and just a simple thing like going into business and so forth for yourself, that can also be that can have quite a strong impact on what your relationships with your friends and family are. You find out who your real friends are and who's really supportive, and also you find out who might feel challenged by that. Mm-hmm. And often I think the freer that you live in your own life, you see, at least my experience has been that I have seen a very strong distinction between those people who are really enthusiastic and supportive and inspired by seeing me make choices in my life to, do the kind of work that I want to do or have the kind of friendships I want or whatever. And other people who I think can feel very challenged by that, because anytime you see somebody doing something to take more freedom in their life, it forces yourself to ask the question, well, why haven't I done that? Yeah. And I think that is something that some people do find really challenging. So it can be very difficult too. And, certainly when I've made decisions in my life about what I want to do with my life, it has been very painful to see how that sometimes, as I say, you find out who your real friends are and you can see that some relationships are just not going to last.
Yeah, I think it is tough. In my experience, most of my friends, I'd say all my friends that I have now are very supportive, but when I run across people that I don't know and I tell them, usually if someone says, what do you do? I don't usually like to answer with just the standard, like I'm a whatever, or I do this job or something. I usually say, well, I'm a perpetual traveler. Right. And it's kind of funny because you get a reaction from most people. They're like, oh, a lot of people just say, what's that? But some people, once I explain it, well, I basically can live anywhere and, travel as I please. And a lot of people will say, oh, wow, well, oh, I couldn't do that because X, Y, and Z, and I've got all these responsibilities, and I have kids, and I have a dog, and, they list all the things and all the reasons why they couldn't do it, even though I wasn't telling them that they should do it. It's just,
right.
just an instant reaction. So I think that when you do step out like that, people do start to think, well, they do kind of wish that they had maybe some sort of lifestyle where they had a little more freedom, but it's pretty difficult to come to the realization that they don't have those things.
Yeah.
So,
and I think, when you make decisions in your own life like that, what you're doing is the most positive kind of, you're standing for something as opposed to just being critical of other people. So, it's really, you creating your own freedom, but that is a kind of, people perceive that as a criticism of their lives. Even though you're actually just working towards your own freedom, people perceive it as, if you don't conform to normal expectations, then people do perceive it as a kind of criticism. And yeah, that's really tough. But you also get to find awesome people who think like you, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, and that's what's cool. I went to this convention, I guess you call it, over the weekend, and it was... It's written. It was done by a guy that wrote a book called "The Art of Nonconformity."
Yeah, is the World Domination Summit?
Yeah, World Domination Summit. Okay,
yeah,
you've heard of it. Most people have.
I have it. It sounds awesome, and I'd really like to go. It's obviously expensive and a long way away, and I think the tickets sell out within like 10 minutes or something, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And there's always ways to get tickets later, as I found out. But I ended up just going and not buying a ticket.
Right.
Just because I wanted to be a part of kind of some of the meetup events around it and the parties and things like that. But it is a place that you can go and actually meet a lot of people that are outside the box, that are, doing things that most people in their lives don't really understand. And so it was nice to get together with a lot of these people that can relate, and I don't have to feel weird about, like what I'm doing. And that's what I find is that there are, this idea of community. You can find your community online, and maybe they're not all like right next door in your neighborhood, but they're out there, and it's a good way to connect. And I think that's something that is really important, to find that tribe or that community that you can relate to.
Absolutely. I mean, it's never been. This is one of the amazing things about being alive now, is that it's the best time to be an individualist and to have an unusual or non-conformist, if you like, type of approach to life, because you can find people online who share your interests and so forth. And I think it must have been really hard back in the day when people lived in small communities and weren't able to make those kind of connections with people outside their geographic location. But we have the opportunity to find people all over the world. I mean, it reminds me, I follow a couple of websites which you might have, I don't know if you've seen, but a couple of websites which are about sort of very frugal ways of living. One is called Mr. Money Moustache, and the other one is called Early Retirement Extreme. And do you know those guys?
I know the Money Mustache guy. Yeah, I have it bookmarked and check it out once in a while.
Well, just what's interesting is that both of them get some kind of trolls and people who think that the whole approach of kind of real frugal living is wacky and strange. But you can see on those websites that a lot of people have also found each other and found common ground in terms of their approach to living. And for people who don't know the approach, it's basically to really go for kind of extreme saving. You save as much of your income as you possibly can in order to achieve as much financial independence as quickly as possible. And, they go for, like, they're looking to save sort of 50% up of their income on an ongoing basis. And just as two communities, those kinds of places online are places where, people who have a different approach to the kind of really massive consumption culture that we live in now, where people are getting in debt and running up credit cards like crazy. If you have a different approach, you can find others online like that, you can share some common ground with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk about the minimalism stuff in a little bit, but I want to talk about traveling. So you're big on traveling, and I know you and your partner, Hannah, go off and do these trips and live in other places. Is that
Yes. Right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've just got back from 7.5 months in Latin America, which was awesome, really awesome, mostly in Mexico.
Okay.
And Hannah works online, and I also work online, so we don't need to be in the UK anymore. And what is amazing is that the last 7.5 months was cheaper, even though we were flying around and visiting all these places. It was still cheaper than it would have been just sitting here in the UK. Because the cost of living is so much lower. So it's just, it's kind of a no-brainer. If you do work online, then you get to see all these places and have all of the life experiences of travel, which are great, and we love doing that. But you also get a cheaper lifestyle. So it's like, well, why wouldn't you do it? Obviously, there are friends and social connections from wherever you come from, so that's a consideration. But especially if you can travel with somebody else. Yeah, as we travel with each other, it's just awesome.
Yeah, it is. In fact, when I went to Southeast Asia last year, one of the things that I did is I moved out of my apartment that I was renting in San Diego, and I just put some stuff in storage and left, bought a one-way ticket, and I wanted to see if I was going to be able to actually save money or if I'd be actually putting out more money while I traveled. And I traveled for 2.5 months and stayed in hotels. I didn't do the hostel thing at all. I just stayed in hotels that were reasonably nice, although a few of them had a few cockroaches. But but basically, I didn't do a luxury trip, but I didn't do a dirty bottom of the barrel hostel trip. But I ended up saving each month. I saved between $500 and $700 each time. So.
Yeah,
it was pretty amazing. I had the same experience that you did, whereas I was doing better traveling from place to place than I was sitting in one place. So.
Yeah, and we weren't even going extreme budget. It's not like we were saving money because we were sort of really trying to live as cheaply as possible, because you can live a lot cheaper than we did. We were using Airbnb and getting places that were really nice. We had swimming pool and stuff. It was really, really nice places to live. And we were also traveling around a lot. So this coming winter, we're planning on staying much more just in Mexico. And that will be much cheaper as well, because we won't have so many flights. And that'll be a different experience too, to see what is it like to just stay in one place and kind of have 6 months living there and see how that feels. So that's the plan for the coming winter.
Where are you headed in Mexico? I'm actually planning a trip down there probably this winter too.
We're going to be in Puerto Vallarta, which is on the west coast.
Okay.
Which is it's a really nice town. It's kind of, we checked out quite a few different places, and Puerto Vallarta's got all of the sort of comforts of having cinema and shopping malls and things that in case you need stuff, it's just really easy.
Sure.
So it's got the benefits of being a town, but it's also pretty small and very laid back, very chilled out. It's got a nice beach, so it's kind of like a really nice compromise of being able to be on the beach, but also not so remote for 6 months that you can't, get stuff that you need and stuff like that.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. What else have you learned, just going around traveling? You said you were in Latin America. What kinds of things have you learned from your experiences there?
Well, as I said, I guess the biggest one is the one that I just talked about, which is just the amazing cost of being in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same for being in the States. And that was like a big shock, because we knew it was going to be cheaper, but really there's a great opportunity there. Also, the other thing which you mentioned before is just the question of kind of stuff and whether you need all your stuff, and that was also one of the biggest learning things for me, was having put everything in storage for 7.5 months, and I came back to realize that it was kind of a hassle to get it all out of storage again, because I hadn't missed it. Right. And I've really, really taken that lesson on board, and I've just decided to minimize the amount of stuff that I have, and I'm right in the middle of doing that at the moment. I've just gone paperless, so I'm now completely paperless.
Wow.
Today I'm getting all of my music is going into the cloud. I'm getting rid of all my CDs, selling them. Yep. And so it's just like going through and trying to get rid of as much stuff. That was another big lesson, I think, from the experience of travel. And I mean, the other thing is it is, some people are not so keen on travel, but I really love sort of finding out about how other places work. And we learned some Spanish while we were out there. We need to do a lot more learning over the next winter, or that is to say we want to. But, it's just really interesting to see how other places work and how other people live, and get a bit of an insight into what else is out there, and overcome the limits of the culture that you happen to be born into, to get a bit of a broader picture of life on the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you feel like, so there's a guy named Jeff Berwick. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yes, yeah, the Dollar Vigilante guy.
Yeah, Dollar Vigilante. So he's down there in Acapulco, and I guess he spends a lot of time in Chile. And he's screaming about how everything is more free down there, whether it's Mexico or Chile, or it's just it's a free place, and it's so much more free than the U.S. And it's funny because I think I know what he's saying, but I think he's kind of goes a little overboard as far as all the freedom that is there. What's your experience with that?
I think my experience is that the freedom really comes from having the flexibility to move around and go where you want to go. I'm not an expert on kind of like Mexican law and all that kind of stuff. I know that you can sort of go in and out and just renew your visa and that kind of stuff. But the real sense of freedom that we had was by just going to a place for a few months. And as a tourist, it is true that you don't have to deal with any bureaucracy, basically, because, we came back to the UK, got to register for the local taxes and register for all kinds of stuff. And when you're traveling, you don't have any of that. And that is a wonderful sense of freedom. And certainly in Mexico, the whole thing about the drug war and all of the stuff that's going on there is very, very much overblown in the media. I do agree with what Jeff Berwick says about that, that those dangerous areas are pretty easy to find out about where they are, basically by the border with the States and in the mountains. And if you're going to the coast and going to small places, which we went to, it's really, really laid back. I personally wouldn't want to live in Mexico City, and I wouldn't really want to live in Acapulco and various other bigger places, but I know Jeff Berwick seems to have a great time there, but it's not for me. But yeah, I mean, we felt incredibly free there. The only difference it was probably in Argentina, where because they have capital controls and because things are really kind of melting down there to economically, it doesn't feel very free there at all. You really got to work hard to change your money. And it's actually quite sad because you can see that things are kind of going downhill, and that is not a good atmosphere compared to somewhere like Chile, which feels like the 90s tech boom again. It's like this amazing sense of optimism, and everything's kind of on the up there.
Yeah, that sounds like a really nice place, and I think for me it goes back to what you were saying earlier on about all the other ways to be free in your life. And I think Chile would probably provide a little more in terms of political freedom than the U.S. or the U.K., but is the trade-off worth it? I mean, I think to actually say, okay, I'm going to uproot and move down to a country where I know nobody and I don't know the language and all that, there's sort of a balance where it's like, okay, I'm gaining 10% more freedom and in terms of politics or bureaucracies and things like that, but really, are you gaining 10% more freedom in your life, or is it worth it? That's the big question.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, certainly, I know that a lot of people look to travel first as a way of getting their freedom, and then they think, okay, right, I really want to go and travel, so now how am I going to fund that? And then they look to what kind of online business they can start and so forth to fund that. And I think that's great. There's nothing wrong with that at all. My approach was different in that it wasn't that I was trying to travel. Travel is something that we've sort of discovered now that we've got more of an opportunity to do so. But my approach to getting more freedom in my life was really to focus on entrepreneurship, because I think that if you do that, then you get a chance to get the maximum freedom wherever you are. You can start tomorrow to look at how you can build your own business and actually be independent and get all of the amazing experience that you have of building up your own life for yourself. And that, I think, if you focus on doing entrepreneurship, then you get the opportunities to do more travel in the future and so forth. And you can, in my case, I ended up selling the business, and now I've got that flexibility. So I think that's a great way to get more freedom. And sometimes when people think about how bad things are getting in the country, like in the States or in the UK, and things are getting really bad, they think that going abroad will get them more freedom, when actually that can be, I think, to a certain degree, for some people, a bit of a distraction. Because I think, as you said, you could land in Chile and not know anyone, and then you're faced with that problem. Okay, now I've got to start a business and try and make some income. And that is even harder potentially if you don't have connections, if you don't know your way around, than just doing it where you grew up.
Yeah, absolutely. Unless you get qualified for the Chilean government's program where they're giving $40,000 to anyone that qualifies to start a business in their country, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. I heard about that. But I guess when I was doing my business, we heard about a UK grant, which was to do with research and development, that if you were in a kind of innovative sector, then you would get there would be a connection to a university. And to cut a long story short, it was such a waste of time that I'm always very, very suspicious of free money, government grants and stuff like that. It's like there really is no such thing as a free lunch. And totally. I don't know what the terms and conditions are, but I just know that any scheme like that, you're going to have so much paperwork and you get bogged down presenting to people. So I'm always a bit suspicious of those things. Yeah,
you're right. It does sound too good to be true. And I actually met a guy that was doing this. It's called Startup Chile, and he said there's a lot of strings attached. It's not just straightforward like, here's your check for $40,000, do whatever you want. It's like
when you arrive at the airport, they just give you a big black attaché case.
Yeah, wouldn't that be something? But I don't know. I wouldn't do it even if that were the case, because it's stolen money. It's loot. So I don't want to be a part of that whole thing anyway. But
yeah, and absolutely. And even I think just as a kind of on a practical level, it just won't work out as free money, because you know that there's going to be all that bureaucracy and everything involved. So, but I absolutely agree with you. If it's some government grant, then that's basically somebody else's taxes that they've had to work for.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so minimalism. So you've been doing this for how long now? Kind of minimalizing and cutting down.
Wow. I mean, not long at all, really. It's this year that I've started doing this, and it's really from the traveling that's kind of given me a real sense of what the opportunity for that is. But I guess I've kind of thrown myself into it head first, and I'm going as fast as I can. But yeah, it's really, really this year that I've got into it. And I did, by the way, really enjoyed the interview that you did with a guy from the Minimalist podcast.
Yeah, Ryan Nicodemus. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think they have a really good approach, because it's like minimalism it's just kind of an individual thing. It's like, it's not a specific number, or that anybody should be doing this, or that, it's just something that whatever works for you, and you look around, like I'm renting a furnished apartment right now, and I'm just looking around the room, and I mean, there's just like massive books. I mean, there's just so many books, and I know that the person that owns this place does not have time to reread or read all these books. There's just no way. And I'm like, how much easier would it be to just get rid of like at least 50% of these books? I mean, it would be, I imagine that her life she would probably feel a lot lighter.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And that's certainly my experience in terms of just clearing out all the paper and getting rid of all of it, for example, and selling. I've listed loads and loads of books and CDs and stuff to sell. It's a huge weight off your shoulders, and it gives you a sense much more of having really purposeful things in your life. Everything that I'm keeping, I know why I've got it, and I know why I'm keeping it. It's not there just in case maybe one day or whatever. It's like, and that actually, you get to really enjoy the things that you do keep, because you know why you've got the things that you choose to keep, and everything else, if you really need it, you can buy one in the future. If you really want to read that book again, you can buy it, but you probably never will.
Exactly.
And so that's another thing which is awesome about being alive today. We have eBay. And so, you can buy stuff back in the future. You can treat eBay like a long-term storage of books and things.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great idea. Now, so going paperless, how did you manage to do that? Because I have not achieved that. I really despise papers and paperwork and files and all that. And I think that the worst thing for me is that the IRS says that you have to keep, 7 years of your tax returns. So I have 7 of these ridiculously awkward boxes full of tax returns, just in case they might audit me someday, and I have to have it all at my fingertips.
And do you actually have to keep that physical individual copy, or can you scan it and chuck the paper.
I might be able to scan it. I hadn't really thought of that. I guess that's an option. I probably could just scan it because
that would be. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, if I were to be audited, well, I could just go and print them out. I mean,
you just print the lot out. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be my thought immediately, and that would be just scan the lot.
Yeah.
Because if you get a top-loading scanner, then it's really fast.
Yeah.
A double-sided a scanner that scans both sides of the paper, top-loading so you can put a whole bunch of sheets in at the same time. It's actually really, really fast to do, and then you can just get that out of your life. The great thing is that it depends on what kind of data it is. Maybe with financial data you might not want to do this, but with a lot of stuff that you just need to keep that you don't really care about confidentiality, you can just put it into Evernote. Because the search capabilities in Evernote are so good in terms of searching inside PDFs and actually reading text off photographs and stuff, that you can just bung everything in there, and if you need it, you'll be able to get it back.
That's right. Yeah, that's an awesome idea. Thanks for giving me a tip.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the great thing is that I think now with tools like that around, any kind of little admin bit of paper that you currently think, well, I probably need to keep this just in case, that kind of thing you can so easily just scan and have a record of.
Yeah.
And most of the time, these are things that you probably will never look at again.
Right.
But just make sure that, as you say, in case you need to print out for an audit or whatever, they're very easy to keep. So, yeah, I mean, the process has actually been really straightforward. You just need to get a decent scanner, and you can get one of those secondhand and you can sell it again afterwards. If you have a big chunk of paper to get through, you can just sort of do it in a one and then even sell the scanner and just use your phone to scan new letters, depending on how much paper you actually have coming in. Once I've gone paperless and I've got all of my sort of correspondence going to just email only, then I don't actually get that much new paper coming in. So I'm probably going to get rid of this scanner and just use my phone.
That's awesome. So do you not do mail now, actual mail?
Well, mail, we do get a lot of mail, but wherever possible, with things like utilities and all that, you can change, most of them you can change to paperless, so you can just get an email. Well, they'll give you a PDF of your latest bill and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so we actually had a friend of ours scanning our mail while we were away, which was enormously helpful, especially if you travel. He scanned in stuff that I left my scanner with him, and he scanned in stuff that came into our mailbox. And so we were able to get all of our mail while we were traveling. But yeah, if you try and minimize the amount of actual paper that comes in by changing all of your utilities and everything to e-billing, then you can actually keep relatively low amount of paper coming through the door.
Yeah, I don't do mail anymore, so I actually don't give people my address, and so I have a permanent address, so I do get some mail, but I have an assistant that basically kind of handles that, and if I need anything, she'll get it to me, and whether it's scanning it in and emailing it or actually shipping it to my address, she's like the only person that has my address. But
that's awesome.
Yes.
That's awesome. Is that a special service that you pay for?
Yeah, it's actually, I have a bookkeeper that kind of acts as an assistant in other ways like that.
Right.
And I mean, you could use something like Earth Class Mail. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I've heard of that. Yeah. I'll have to look into that because that sounds great.
Yeah, I had that for a little while, and it's good. It works really well, and especially, I don't know how it works as someone in the UK, but for here in the States, it was a little bit of I don't know if you call it a scam, but I wanted to buy a computer, and I was ordering it through the mail, and with Earth Class Mail, you can get an address in Oregon, which is a tax-free state. There's no sales tax in Oregon. So I saved myself about, I think it was like $250 by sending it to my Earth Class Mail address, and then what they do is they just ship it to you, and then you pay. I think the service was, at that point, it was like $10 a month. So
that's cool.
Yeah, yeah. So stuff like that. It's a cool service. I don't have it at this point because I have my assistant, but I think that can work really well for this type of thing.
Yeah, well, we sort of did something similar in that we had a mailbox, etc., forwarding all our mail to that, and then a friend of ours actually scanned it in for us. So, but yeah, definitely worth looking into that kind of thing for the future.
Yeah, for sure. Just going back to kind of the travel thing, what do you think about how important are your surroundings? I mean, as far as kind of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, what you're seeing, the people around you, all of that in terms of where you live.
Well, a few experiences that kind of made a big impression on us when we were traveling. One was we got into saving money where we could and, looking at ways that we could live really cheaply. And then we realized that skimping on accommodation is not a good plan. It's not fun. And we stayed in one place that, you mentioned cockroaches before, and we stayed in one place that had a lot of cockroaches, and it was just a hassle. It's just no fun. It kind of wears you down, especially if you're working at home and, you're sitting there with your laptop and then you got to deal with cockroaches and stuff like that. So for us, and obviously everyone's different, everyone has different levels of comfort and so forth, but for us, it doesn't make a lot of sense to go super cheap on accommodation because, places like Mexico, it's so cheap anyway that, you don't need to kind of go how low can we go? You can actually just get something really, really decent for a great price. So the apartment or house, I think, is important, especially if you're working at home, and we both were. I've been writing a book all the winter and has a website, and she's been doing that. So we've both been sort of needing a place to sit with laptops and get on with work. So that's really important. I think it's also really important to be able to meet up with friends and loved ones and to find ways of doing that at regular intervals. And we had the opportunity to meet up with great friends when we were in Mexico, which was really good fun too. So that can be important. So those, I guess, are two considerations. Apart from that, I guess there's personal preferences. I just love being by the sea, and there's lots of great beaches in Mexico.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got me thinking about Puerto Vallarta now. I think I might have to add that to the list. Sure.
Yeah. We stayed actually just up the coast from Puerto Vallarta in a really beautiful town called Sayulita, which is a small kind of basically a touristy town oriented towards surfing. And it's such a gorgeous beach. And when you live in a place like that, you can go out for a walk on an empty beach in the morning, and it's just such a nice experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what are your plans now for your website and kind of traveling and anything else that you have upcoming?
Well, I'm currently writing a book, and I'm hoping to get that done this year. It's about entrepreneurship, and I've just finished the first draft, and I've got to tame this thing now because I've kind of written this big first draft which I want to clean up and do quite a lot of revision to. So that's the big project that I'm working on at the moment. As for the Voluntary Life, I'm really enjoying doing interviews and doing solo podcasts, and just will be carrying on at the moment. My focus is really on the book, and then I guess we'll see what happens after that. I intend to self-publish it. And then in terms of other plans, we'll be going back to Mexico and spending 6 months there over the winter.
Awesome. So the book is going to be available on Kindle, I assume?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Cool. Well, let me know when it's out, and I'll make sure to read it and give you a review.
Thank you very much. Yeah. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I really like what you're doing. So I'm sure the book will be interesting and helpful and inspirational at the same time.
Great.
Cool. Well, that's about all I had. So, Jake, thanks so much for coming on, and good luck with everything you're doing. I can't wait to keep following you and see what's next.
Thanks so much, Kevin. It was great fun chatting to you.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget, if you like this show, please give us a rating and review on iTunes, and we'll have the link to that in the show notes at freedomlovin.com. And the music today has been local San Diego band Pinback with Devil You Know. Have a great week.